Diet Coke Love Story by me, Kaylee May.
My first words spoken when I entered this life were, "Hello, world." It had been a while since Hartley had asked me to give him a visit. The previous 3 months had been pretty quiet, and he hadn't called on me for anything. Before that, I was called into one of the factories at least once a day. At first, I enjoyed the occasional days off. We were allowed to personalize our apartments, and I took the time to make my living space as efficient as possible. When my task had been completed, I noticed that it had been 6 weeks that I hadn't had a single call-out. Now that my apartment was efficient and the cable management was impeccable, all I could do was sit around and wait for a call. I wasn't expecting Hartley himself to call me, so it must have been important. Usually, it was one of the assistants, and they would just include it in my calendar download. I did enjoy Hartley's complex. It was rare invites were given to go into such an exclusive place. Not that I was dirty or rowdy, I just didn't serve a purpose that could require me to be so close to him. The fence around the complex was a lovely blue, hex code #34B1C7 to be precise. The fence used a patented steel mesh which was covered in a recyclable gloss paint. It reminded me of tiny little hash symbols. It felt like how I imagined that someone such as Hartley would feel on the inside. I, too, would be content if my inside was filled with objectively reliable parts that could synchronize in such a way that human knowledge could perform fairly reliable repairs. That must make one feel very happy. As I arrived at the door, the same hex code #34B1C7 color as the compound fence, a woman answered. She had short black hair and was just a little shorter than myself.
Hello.
"Hello. I am here to see Hartley." After a brief pause, she gestured to the door and opened it enough for me to walk past her. The first floor was similar to my own building. The doors were #086330. Hartley had chosen this color due to the mythology that it was linked to scholarship. Hartley liked human legends. I quite enjoyed the knowledge of them myself. The lovely being smoothly turned her head 45 degrees to simulate eye contact. I took this as a social cue. "Is your apartment on this floor?"
Yes, Mr. Hartley is not ready for your company.
"Could you show me your apartment?"
Yes.
I noted her dress was #AD030C. It was the color of blood. It was the color of roses. It was the color of the most important wires in my projects. Her door indicated that she was a scholar too. Her apartment had also been optimized for her purpose. Her small kitchen table had no tablecloth, as this would only promote the need to wash the cloth. Wiping a spill would be just as efficient. I admired her forward thinking. The fridge, which was the centerpiece of the kitchen, was tall and thin. As the silver door opened, I observed that every level was filled with Diet Coke. This was the drink that I was programmed to enjoy the most.
Select a beverage.
Was this why I had suddenly been called?
Select a beverage.
Did Hartley make this exemplification of humanity just for me?
Select a beverage.
I was being rewarded.
Select a beverage.
I was not useless.
Select a beverage.
The woman smiled.
Select a beverage.
Diet Coke. Shelf G. Placeholder 2. This was the closest to her hand, which would make the task of restocking the shelf the most efficient, so that she would have more time in her day to be productive, rather than waste time on being hospitable towards myself. I did not know her programming, or if she could be impressed. However, I was willing to take that chance if she was able to be impressed that my knowledge and respect for her efficiency would be noted if a need for a future research partner were to arise. She selected the beverage and placed it in front of me. "Have a beverage too," I suggested.
Yes.
She took the next logically placed Diet Coke, which would minimize movement for restocking later. I admired her expertise silently. "Please, sit down." She sat opposite me as we both held our drinks in our right hand. We stared at each other. It was a nice feeling. This must be what doing nothing was. I had not been programmed to emit facial expressions, but I tried to remember the correct sequence to move the receptors in my face to indicate that I was pleased with the current situation. The woman must have noted this, as she also returned a similar facial expression. Hartley had reached perfection. We sat in silence for a long time. Condensation from the unopened beverage had begun to drip down my hand. This would be an unpleasant feeling had my hand been created prior to software update 27.8. However, with such a well-manufactured specimen in my presence, I could have been created before patch 14 had even been conceived, and the unpleasant sensation would have been drowned out by the radiance of her. I did not know her name. This was not important information. She lived behind door 27, so I knew how to indicate to Hartley which of the current household was worthy of commendation. Hartley was such a wonderful creature, even if he was the only one of us who remained of the flesh. The eyes of the woman behind door 27 quickly flashed as we sat down in posed silence with our unopened bottles of Diet Coke.
"Hartley is ready to see you now."
It is appropriate to say that this is acceptable hospitality.
"Thank you for the acknowledgement."
I didn't know if she was coded for the next part, but I had been programmed for a mild touch of curiosity and quality testing. I proposed that we should engage in hospitality at a later date. Once again, her face indicated a delighted expression.
"I agree to these terms. I will seek access to your work schedule and will detect a time that we can be mutually productive."
Productivity is also a hobby of mine. These terms are accepted. My facial controls were making adequate progress on smiling since meeting door 27. I left room 27 and entered the elevator. Once scanned, it took me rapidly to Hartley's floor. I did not understand his need for windows or for so much space. His penthouse certainly did nothing to maximize efficiency of necessary activities.
Yo!
Hartley yelled from the couch as I had to approach by taking 34 steps. My programming allowed for it, but I still had the calculations in my head that would allow for optimal couch distance that would require less steps. "Hello, Hartley. Thank you for calling me to see you." I had wondered if perhaps I had become obsolete within the constructs of your latest designs. He had a grin on his face. He wore a baseball cap backwards and indoors, which was always perplexing. Even more perplexing was his next question.
"So you met Sal, did ya?"
"Do you mean the woman behind door 27? He shrugged.
"I don't know. Probably. She's hot though, hey."
I was confused. I observed she did not appear to have any cooling issues. "Did you call me to repair a fault in her system?"
"Nah, man, she's perfect. She'll do anything I say."
"Of course, Hartley. This is our purpose."
"Yeah, my man, but you don't have boobs."
I did not know this word. I inquired, "Would you like me to establish an order to receive these boobs in the next patch? I would like to work with Sal on this if possible. I have found that our programs are quite compatible."
"Nah, bro, I think you got the wrong idea. I called you up here 'cause we're doing some recycling."
"Recycling?"
"Yeah. These hotties sell for a mint, but their parts ain't coming in cheap due to the board shortages."
"Perhaps there is a way to create these boards more efficiently." That is when Hartley got up, approaching me with his arm outstretched towards my back circuitry to open up the button cover where my power is controlled from. The last thing I scanned with my optical unit was the word Supreme printed across his freshly starched t-shirt. My first words spoken when I entered this life were, "Hello, world." My last words heard as I exited this life were,
Yeah. Sorry, bro.